Hey everybody, this is Captain Resurrector. I want you to know up front that this video contains full game spoilers for Ultima 2: The Revenge of the Enchantress. It also assumes some familiarity with the first Ultima, which I have already reviewed. If you want an opinion real quick, spoiler-free, I don't particularly recommend this game for reasons I will of course get into. Of course, nowadays, the first 3 Ultimas are sold in a pack together, and this game is pretty short. So if you like Ultima 1 and you're just aching for more of the same, you might get something out of the sequel. With that out of the way, let's get right down to it. In the year 4 BDQ, following the critical and financial success of the original Ultima, Richard Garriott, helped along by a slightly larger dev team, released a sequel to that seminal work. Ultima 2: The Revenge of the Enchantress was published for Apple II computers by Sierra Online, not yet of King's Quest and Leisure Suit Larry fame, apparently because Garriott's first publisher was either unwilling or unable to manufacture a cloth map with every copy of the game, which was a vital gameplay element. This new game is essentially an iteration on the first, with slightly improved character creation, the same combat mechanics we saw in the Ultima 1 remake, the same exploration system, and a larger and more elaborate game world. For this review, I once again played the DOS port as released in the Ultima collection. However, unlike the first game, the DOS ports of the next few Ultimas were not updated remakes, but butchered ports of the Apple originals, with horrid purple and cyan color schemes, no music starting in 3, and at least in the present case, new glitches. I played the game in this bastardized version many years ago, shortly after playing Ultima 1, but I never finished it. This time around, I used the excellent Ultima 2 upgrade patch by the Exodus project, which I can't recommend highly enough. It introduces many bug fixes and a more flattering color palette, bringing the DOS version up to speed with the original, besides some much needed quality of life improvements that we'll talk about when they become relevant. Now, I spent much of the previous video discussing Ultima 1's historical importance and influence on later games, and that's not going to happen this time. The simple fact is that Ultima 1 is inarguably one of the most innovative and influential video games ever released, and though I have yet to beat it myself, I know through reputation that Ultima 3 is just as important, if not more so. This leads, more often than not, to Ultima 2 being overlooked and dismissed, treated as little more than a historical footnote to those other giants. In a broad historical view, it might be fair to treat it as a footnote, but I think it's just as important to look at these games not only for the later works they inspired, but for their own sake. If you'll indulge a really pretentious analogy for a moment, Beethoven's Third Symphony is a titanic, original, quite literally revolutionary work of genius that changed the way people write symphonies forever. Bigger, longer, louder, and more epic than any other symphony of the time. And similarly, his fifth set a new standard for narrative structure in symphonic forms, a grand heroic struggle that begins in tragedy and ends in triumph, with a memorable little rhythmic figure that pops up at multiple points throughout and glues the whole thing together. Without either of these works, the arc of music history would undeniably look very different. The same just isn't true of the fourth. If Beethoven had taken a little break from symphony writing and went straight from the third to the fifth, what changes about classical music? Maybe we end up having a superstition of the curse of the eighth, and Mahler ends up calling his eighth symphony a grand cantata or something, but that's about it. Still, he did write his fourth symphony, and it is worth listening to just because it's so much fun. Now, this analogy breaks down in one detail, which is that Ultima 2 kinda sucks, but my point is that the games themselves matter, whether or not they shaped games to come. After the defeat of the evil Mondane in Ultima, there was a new age of peace and prosperity on Earth. Yes, Earth. This game takes place on the Earth as we know it, except with elves and orcs and such, so all mention of Caesarea is retcon from the first game's events. Anyway, Mondane got his butt kicked and Earth was at peace. Something to do with Mondane's time travel shenanigans caused time doors to open up after his death, and the world's scientists, philosophers, and explorers set to work mapping them out, exploring the new connections between the time periods. But one day an injured orc was found. He was rescued and became friendly, fathering a whole population of good orcs that you see all over the game, presumably with some unnamed humanoid girl. However, his appearance was a sign that somebody was getting up to some black magic. It turns out Mondane had been teaching a child prodigy named Minax when he was killed. Now she's all grown up, and she's pissed. She's holed up in a castle in the distant past, raising an army of orcs and demons, and is sending her evil magic influence to darken the hearts of men. This led America and the USSR to destroy the planet in a nuclear war. All life on Earth would have been destroyed if not for the Time Doors. You play a hero who escaped from the war into the past, and has been tasked by Lord British, who lives in real-life Britain now, with killing Minax and saving the world. This time around, the manual is a bit more terse and straightforward in describing the contents of the game, which I consider an improvement considering how the first game lied about how classes worked. Sure, you don't get the nice illustrations, which is a shame, but this time the manual says that, for instance, only wizards can cast Kill, and lo and behold, only wizards can cast Kill. Additionally, the manual includes necessary information on how to navigate using the time map, a set of coordinates for all the known planets of the solar system, and descriptions of the 5 time periods, all of which is essential. Character creation is somewhat improved from the first game, in that clerics and wizards both get their own sets of spells with a few that they both use, and fighters and thieves get no spells at all. To be clear, this is only an improvement on paper for reasons we'll get to later, but the classes are more differentiated here. Also, in addition to the stat boosts for race and class, your choice of sex alters your starting stats as well. I went with a fighter this time for variety's sake. Note the dragon on the title screen. There are still no dragons in this game. I'm frankly not sure there are any in the whole series. This is false advertising, and I won't stand for it. Once you make your character and start your new file, you find yourself in North America with no direction except to go explore the Earth. You can go get lunch at Legally Distinct Burger Joint, just like in real life. You can get stabbed in Florida, just like in real life. You can run all the way from Alaska to South Africa in a minute, just like in real life. As far as the basic gameplay goes, Ultima 2 is substantially similar to the first game. You have the exact same exploration interface that I gushed about at length last time, with the overworld town dungeon framework, the mix of top-down and first-person views, and a similar set of key commands. The combat system is new, but it was retroactively put into the Ultima 1 remake I reviewed. Basically, everything that worked so well about the moment-to-moment gameplay last time is present here, and it all works just as well. The differences mostly lie in the design of the game world, which will be apparent as soon as you reach your first town. The towns, unlike the more minimal, single-screen hamlets of the first game, are now large, sprawling spaces full of NPCs skittering around all over the place. The size of the towns actually ends up being a major gameplay consideration, since you actually use up food when you walk around in them, and since bigger towns means more guards. You can talk to every single NPC individually, not just kings and shopkeepers. Sure, most of the townsfolk just say stock phrases, but there are many who give you necessary hints, or else have a unique bit of flavor text. Most of the flavor text takes the form of goofy little pop culture references, like how you can meet the creators of wizardry in this wizard shop, or this nun named Sister Sledge. Also, you can offer every NPC gold in increments of 100. It's nice to have more options for interaction than just a talk button, but this mechanic ends up making the game more cumbersome than it needs to be, as we'll see. The other major improvement to the towns is that each one is unique. They all have different layouts, different dialogue to find, and several of them house necessary quest objectives. This means that, unlike Ultima 1, it's worth the time and effort to explore every town you come across, and though some of them can be skipped, even the skippable ones have something in them to help flesh out the setting. All of these advancements do wonders to make the Earth of Ultima 2 feel more real and fully formed than the Caesarea of Ultima 1. After buying a horse and what little equipment you can afford, it's time to get situated. The central conceit of Ultima 2, what really sets it apart, is the new time travel mechanic. Dotted all over the overworld are time gates, which appear and disappear at set intervals. The player has to use the time gates to zip back and forth between 5 distinct eras. Pangaea, which is one giant continent covered in poisoned swamps and home to an ancient advanced civilization of astronauts. BC and AD, which are the most normal settings, each with a different set of towns. Aftermath, where all human civilization has been consumed in nuclear fire except for a dilapidated remnant of the USSR, and finally the Time of Legends, where Minax is hiding, and which acts as a convenient hub because it has gates to the other 4 times all right next to each other. You start the game in the BC time period, but nothing tells you that. You have to walk around until you see some time gates and deduce when you are based on their placement compared to the cloth map. Each of the 5 time periods has its own unique locations, so navigating through the gates is essential. This would be hopelessly confusing if not for the physical map that comes with the game, which is a great addition. It's fun trying to explore a new time period and consulting the map, tracing out a path to wind your way through multiple time periods to land in your destination. It forces the player to engage with the game's setting as a form of puzzle solving, once again reinforcing the more concrete nature of the game world. It's for this reason that I actually think the often ridiculed setting on Earth rather than Caesarea was a brilliant move. Setting up a fantasy world with enough history, geography, and lore to justify the multiple time periods, as well as taking the time to familiarize the player with that world enough to effectively navigate it, would have been extremely difficult. Sure, Chrono Trigger famously pulled it off, but that was after more than a decade of developments in technology, game design, and the art form of video game storytelling. However, by setting the game on the familiar map of Earth as we know it, the differences between time periods are instantly understood. Precious disk space doesn't need to be spent on setting up the world's lore, all of that work is offloaded onto the player's knowledge of real-world lore. The devs didn't have to put any effort into explaining Aftermath, for example. The player just walks through a portal that he knows leads to the future, sees that a good chunk of the world's landmass is underwater now to the point that the Americas aren't even connected anymore, and the dire stakes are made clear. Not to mention the familiar geography helps with navigating. It kind of acts as a mental shorthand when plotting a route. Like if I want to get to AD Texas, where you'll be spending a lot of your time, I don't even have to think about the 4th dimension. I just go to South America, then hop in the same door I came out of, then I'll be on South America again, except there will be a town in Texas now. The whole game is made more intuitive by being set on Earth, though it of course conflicts with the other Ultima titles and contributes to the sense that this one is more of a side excursion than a real chapter in the series' story. You actually have to go through a time gate to reach Lord British for the first time. All he does is heal you since there isn't a proper quest system here, but you can find a priest in his castle named Brother Antos who tells you to look for his father, which ends up being the goal for most of the game. As with the first game, much of your time is spent scraping by and barely surviving while you piece together the steps to victory, not to mention how to raise your stats, which believe me, we're gonna get to that. Your main sources of information are individual NPCs like Brother Antos scattered across the game, as well as pubs and seers that all give the same hints. You have to explore every nook and cranny of the game world and take notes to ever have a hope of winning without a guide. As for scraping by and surviving, it's actually pretty difficult. To keep up your health and food supplies, you need gold. To get gold, you have to kill enemies on the overworld. The problem is that the spawn rate is far too low. Monsters show up whenever they feel like it, and sometimes they'll spawn on islands that you can't reach without a boat, which just makes the process slower since I'm pretty sure the spawns slow down as the world map fills up. You'll literally starve to death while every orc in Europe just kind of leaves you alone. To have any hope of survival, you're basically forced to stuff yourself on sackfuls of stolen fish and chips, saving your money for, well, everything else. Now, those of you familiar with the first Ultima, or who just watched my first video, might be saying, Rez, what about the dungeons? Wouldn't it be more efficient to go monster hunting in the dungeons, where the encounter rates are higher and you get health rewards for killing them? Why, yes it would. I would have loved to do that. One little problem. They ruined the dungeons! My favorite part of Ultima 1, dash to the ground! There are plenty of monsters in there, it's true, but you don't get health from them. You go down in the dungeon, you come out half dead with more money in your pockets. One of the main methods of strengthening your character has been summarily removed. Not to mention, the dungeons are dark now, and you have to use up consumable torches to explore them. Where do you get those torches? By killing monsters on the overworld, of course, just the thing we were trying to avoid. Now, this could have signaled a shift in the purpose of dungeon crawling. Since you don't get more health from them, surely you're supposed to run around outside building up supplies for a lengthy expedition. That's a much more typical use of RPG dungeons anyway, as endurance challenges you have to conquer. There must be something really useful down there, like a required quest item or a message on the wall that gives you a hint, right? Wrong. You can beat the entire game without ever entering the dungeons. I only went in a couple of times to see if they would help with money grinding, which they didn't in my experience. The dungeons are purely vestigial, and I feel sorry for anybody who played this back in the day with no internet to warn them. Imagine going to all the trouble to map one of these for nothing. The uselessness of dungeoneering is an obvious downgrade, given that it was the best part of Ultima 1, and for that matter made up the whole game in Akalabeth. Still, you can make a good RPG without any dungeons. Admittedly, I'm not thinking of any off the top of my head, but if the rest of the game is good, that should carry it, right? Right? To properly understand the tedium of what follows, I think it will be best to outline the basic steps of the quest first. Remember as I do that this game doesn't tell you anything at the outset. You have to find the hints and piece this together yourself. So, Minax is in her castle in the Time of Legends, which can be accessed from the word go. The only thing keeping you from reaching the castle is a giant demon army that you stand no chance taking on without near maxed out stats. Once you get to the castle, you'll be foiled by damaging floors that absolutely shred your poor little dwarf to bits, and even if you somehow grit your teeth and make it to the throne room, Minax is invincible. So to actually accomplish anything in Legends, you have to first get the Quick Sword and Nilno, which is the only thing that can damage the Enchantress, as well as a ring which as far as I know doesn't have a name. The ring makes you immune to the damaging floors. The sword you can get fairly early, I was just dumb and didn't figure it out, but getting the ring is a whole process. You can only get the ring after you find Brother Antos' father. If you go back to Pangaea and trudge through the poison swamps, you can find a village where some astronauts live, and they'll tell you that Father Antos, yes, that is his name, lives on Planet X. Yes, Planet X. They also tell you the coordinates to get there, but that's not very useful, seeing as you don't have a spaceship, and apparently all the village blacksmiths forgot how to build them since the last game. So to get a spaceship, you have to go to the remnants of the Soviet Union in Aftermath and hijack one. The only problem with that is that all time gates to Aftermath lead to North America, and all the land bridges are decimated. So you have to bring an airplane through a time gate and fly over to the Eastern Hemisphere. The only way to get a plane is to go to New San Antonio in AD, the worst town in any RPG, and go steal it. The only problem there is that the plane is behind a locked door, and the only way to get keys, which are single-use by the way, is to kill guards, which are the toughest enemies outside of the endgame. You would be hard-pressed to kill a single guard without first jacking up your stats. So you have to figure out how to raise your stats, which once again the game and the manual both don't tell you. To be clear, none of what I just listed is bad. It's a goofy sequence of events, sure, but this is supposed to be a goofy game. And it's so elaborate so you have to spend longer figuring it out and executing it. More bang for your buck without much more disk space, you know? The problem is that last sticking point. How you raise your stats. Welcome to the Hotel California. This is extremely cryptic. I have no idea how you're supposed to figure it out. I looked it up the first time I played. You go to New San Antonio and talk to the hotel clerk. As I mentioned before, you can offer NPCs gold in multiples of 100. Almost everybody in the game just takes your money and thanks you, wasting your time and money. If you offer the clerk money, he'll do one of two things. He'll either say thank you, which good luck ever figuring this out if he said thank you the first time, nobody's gonna try again, or he'll say alakazam. You still probably won't know what happened, but if you open your stat screen, and you had your stats memorized already for that matter, you'll see that one of your stats increased a little bit. One stat. Chosen at random, with no obvious tell. This is your one and only method of leveling up your character. You get something like 3 or 4 points in a random stat for 100 gold, which can take several minutes to grind up. This is the worst system of character growth I've ever seen in an RPG. You'd have to get pretty creative to make up a worse one, frankly. If you want to reinsert some player choice into the system, for instance if you really want agility so you can equip better weapons, you're going to have to save scum. The mod I used added in a hotkey to reload your save file, so I just reset and tried again every time I got the wrong roll. However, in the game as designed, save scumming is prohibitively inconvenient. There's no reset button, and in fact the game autosaves every time you enter the overworld. Luckily the patch lets you turn off the autosave as well. When I played the first time unmodded, I had to weigh whether it was better to take the loss and go grind again, or X out and reopen DOSBox. And back in the day, on a real DOS computer, there was no way to restart or exit the game by the manual's own admission except to restart your computer entirely. So you're expected to grind for Lord knows how many hours, throwing endless gobs of cash at this guy with a good chunk of it wasted until your stats are near max. This is basically step 1 to beating the game, and keep in mind, on top of the chance of wasting your money that they intentionally programmed into the game, the wisdom stat is also a complete waste. The only thing it affects is spellcasting, so it's obviously useless for fighters and thieves, but also the only place you can use spells is in the dungeons. The useless, extraneous dungeons. Oh, and this is fixed in the patch, but originally the stats could roll over to 0. So that's nice. Now you may be thinking, wait, Rez, look at your stats screen. It says your level right there. Surely leveling up does something for you. They wouldn't make a second game in a row where experience points do nothing, would they? No, they would not. Leveling up with experience points has a very important gameplay function. It makes stronger monsters spawn on the overworld. Over time, you start seeing more and more demons and eventually Balrons chasing you around. This means that your level functions as a sort of soft time limit. You have to figure out this asinine mechanic before the monsters level up too much for your default early game character to handle. It's not even like stronger monsters give you more gold either, they just drain you more. Once you finish cursing the day the eagles ever formed and accept your fate, you hop on a boat and zip around the world over and over, slowly picking off enemies with your cannons. Getting the boat is a bit cryptic too, actually. Enemy boats sail up to the shore to attack you, and you can just walk on and hijack them, but only if you have a blue tassel. Overworld monsters drop items as well as gold, which is a welcome addition, but much like with the hotel clerk, nothing tells you they dropped something, you just have to look at your stats, and even then nothing tells you what all this junk does. You need random drops to fuel your spaceship later on as well. Thieves can steal your stuff, but the game doesn't explicitly tell you what they stole. Not that you'll ever miss it, with all the money grinding you'll get more than enough items without even thinking about it. The game making you look at your stats actually led me to an amazing discovery. I ran up to the clerk and hit O for offer, then realized I hadn't looked at my stats and I wouldn't know which one raised. So I offered him 0 gold so I could check my stats first. If you offer 0 gold, he maxes out a random stat for free. Needless to say, I took full advantage of this, shaving who knows how many hours off of my playtime. Now that you've checked out of the Hotel California, it's a piece of cake to run around slaughtering guards for their keys. Finally, I can annoy women in the McDonald's bathroom, just like in real life. From this point, stealing a plane and a space shuttle is easy as pie. After scratching and clawing to stay afloat at the start, suddenly being nigh invincible like this is a bit of a power trip. Assuming you were lucky enough to get some trilithium fuel earlier from random drops, you can take on the space sequence. Outer space is a bit of a disappointment. None of the planets besides Earth and Planet X have anything necessary on them. The hint about bribing the hotel clerk is in space, but I'm honestly not sure you can even reach it without figuring out how to raise your stats first. On the other hand, the hint about Planet X's whereabouts is back on Earth, which means there's no point exploring the rest of the solar system. If you do bother with exploring the side planets, you get a little bit of world building, like how the space colonies are populated by Lord British's subjects with his insignia plastered all over the place. Wow, it really is like real life. There's a couple funny optional towns to find as well, like the village of jesters that live on Uranus, fittingly enough, and a computer camp on Neptune where you can meet Richard Garriott. Wait, isn't he supposed to be Lord British? How does that work? Oh, and just so you know, if you land the shuttle on anything besides grassland, you die instantly. Have I mentioned that if you die, the game stays stuck on the death screen with no way to reset? So that back in the day, you had to restart your computer anytime you died? Who playtested this? On Planet X, you reach Castle Barataria, which used to be on Sosaria in the first Ultima, continuity be damned. Here you meet the only king besides Lord British, and you can find Father Antos hidden away in the Queen's chambers. He gives you his blessing and tells you to return and claim the ring. Okay, return where? Alright, we're just about ready to go kill Minax. We just need to deal with 2 more big money sinks and some more asinine cryptic puzzles besides. This, I really don't know how you were supposed to figure out. First, you want to go see a seer. There are plenty of them spread throughout the game, all with the same set of 9 hints, priced at 100 gold, then 200, all the way up to 900. But then it's not actually 9 separate hints, it's really 9 lines in a poem that all add up to one hint about how to get the ring. In total, assuming no save scumming, you are expected to pay 4,500 gold for this single hint, which is just obscene. All told, this poem tells you to find an old man under a tree. The old man is in a little out-of-the-way nook in New San Antonio behind a locked door. I love how they just wrote a tree over his head instead of making a unique tree graphic. Anyway, he won't give you the ring unless you have Father Antos's blessing, but even if you do, he doesn't seem to respond. What you have to do, by what thought process I don't know, is offer him 500 gold exactly. Any more or any less, and he just takes your money. Then, you need to get the quicksword from this prisoner, also in New San Antonio. You can actually do this as soon as you're strong enough to kill guards, I just figured it out last. He tells you he has the quicksword, but I couldn't figure out how to get it from him. I tried stealing, no dice. I tried killing him for it, nothing. I even searched all around his cell. Turns out you just offer him 500 gold. Exactly. If you're keeping track, that means that to get through the endgame quests without guides and without save scumming, and remember this game predates game FAQs, and save scumming meant restarting your computer, you have to pay 5,500 gold. And that's not counting grinding up to near max health for the final battle, which will also take thousands of gold. The sheer amount of grinding necessary to win is mind-numbing, even with the Offer Zero glitch. The only games I can think of off the top of my head with a similar grind are the first Dragon Quest and Bard's Tale games, and at least those had high encounter rates. Most of the grind in Ultima 2 is circling the globe waiting to see one monster with 20 gold max. Finally, at long last, it's time to storm Minax's castle. The enemies in Legends are much stronger than their equivalents everywhere else, so you really want a lot of health built up first. The castle is crawling with strong enemies, including thieves, which, fun fact, can steal your ring. I found this out the hard way. There's also a bunch of Balrons that can absolutely wreck you with sleep spells, including one invincible Balron that will dog you the entire time. Hopefully all the enemies you've been grinding on have dropped plenty of magic coins, which you can use to stop time and slip by him. To kill Minax, you just stab her in the face, which will cause her to teleport to the opposite end of the castle. Walk all the way across, stab her again, and she'll teleport again. Repeat this process for about a year, avoiding the stupid invincible Balron all the while, and the world is saved. You know, for now. In conclusion, Ultima 2 is, on paper, an impressive sequel. It takes everything great and innovative about the original Ultima, sets it in a more fully realized game world with a more elaborate questline, and doubles down on the freewheeling hodgepodge of fantasy and sci-fi elements that made the first game so charming in the first place. In practice, however, it's far too cryptic and far too grindy, and the resulting tedium makes it difficult to recommend. It's Ultima 1 all over again. Bigger, better, and nowhere near as good.